and we also have a live transmission that we must ensure and continue. If you could please take your seats. We will now talk about a very new topic, a new model law that was approved in Parlatino, the model law to fight illicit trade and transnational crime. And the innovation of this model law, which is the link between illicit trade and transnational organized crime. For this, from Argentina, we will have virtually Senator Silvia Giacoppo. Aside from being a senator for the Republic of Argentina, she's also the internal secretary for that commission at Parlatino. So we greet you from your home, Parlatino, Mr. Vermeer Ovalle, Vice President of the WCO, the World Customs Organization, and also in Guatemala, Customs Intendant, and also Mr. Albert Sandy is Executive Secretary of the Korean Customs and Law Enforcement Council. At the end of this panel, we will sign a cooperation agreement between CCLEC and the Parlatino. And we also have online General Juan Carlos Buitrago. And he's the former chief of Economic and Finance Police for Colombia, POLFA, with a broad experience in work and experience for transnational crime in other countries from Colombia. So welcome everyone. Welcome, Madam Senator. It's a pleasure to see you and have you here. To General Buitrago from Colombia, thank you so much for being here. And now I would like to start the afternoon dialogue with the four of you. First, welcoming Vermeer Ovalle, and I'll now give him the floor. So, Vermeer, talking about the model law in Parlatino, when we think about customs in Latin America and the Caribbean, what do you think that it's the most important point that this law gives to the assistance of the Customs Authority? Thank you so much to our invitation of Customs on behalf of the WCO to be able to address this point that's very important for custom authorities, which is illegal trade. Basically, among the different topics that we see in the model law of the Parlatino, in regards to the very important characteristics that we must mention and can give us a plus not only in the national but also the regional aspect. It's a comprehensive approach to illegal trade. We usually think of the perspective of the impact in regards to tax collection, but now we're thinking about this from a comprehensive approach where illegal trade has a relationship and also an impact in security, because many criminal organizations are using illegal trade as a way in which they finance their activities. And this model law would help the countries to be able to understand under this perspective their dynamic. Several of the previous speakers in this activity, they've all talked about the importance of having coordination and interagency mechanisms. And the principles of the model law is able to mention the importance of coordination at a multi-sectorial level and a national level, because this problem not only affects the states but also corporations and the private sector, meaning that we need communication and coordination mechanisms to be able to exchange information. Also, when we think of the efforts that need to be carried out on the bilateral and multinational, specifically multilaterally, to be able to exchange information. And when we talk about exchanging information among different customs authorities, but if we're able to include other organizations in the borders that have other activities that must be carried out in the borders, and it's important or vital to exchange information. So part of what is being promoted is not only at a regional level, but in the framework of the regional organization, where we think about the work that needs to happen among customs authorities, but also among other actors, which is fundamental, and to ensure that we can address this in an interinstitutional level. To be able to exchange intelligence. This is fundamental. Without intelligence, we would not be able to move forward. And it's important to generate a coordination strategy with police units, with the public ministry, and to have strategic prosecution to be able to address this illegal trade. And it's part of the efforts that this model law is able to promote here, when you have a legal framework that is able to determine the importance, not only in regards to having laws, because not every state have national legislations in regards to illicit trade, and it's part of the elements that you need to have, or that I could give in regards to context. Thank you, Werner. Madam Senator, we know that in the context of model laws, it's something that does not happen overnight. It's a process of dialogue and consensus with other countries that are part of the Parlatino. Can you tell us about the experience of Parlatino and why the importance of the model law that we are mentioning now for the Parlatino? Good morning. Good day. It's important, and it's an honor for me to be part of this parliamentary forum on intelligence and security. I would like to thank our friend Alejo Campos and the Honorable Congressman Robert Pittenger for choosing and trusting in our parliament as a host for this meeting. I am convinced that this is the best moment to do this, because we are the parliament that's able to have the greatest representation of the entire region. To Jorge Pizarro, to the Secretariat, Elias Castillo, thank you for all the support that I know that you've provided to ensure that this event. And Alejo, you asked about the process. It's a process that, yes, most certainly took time. And it's something that we were able to share with many organizations. As a representative of the parliament, of this regional parliamentary body, and I like to say that I feel very pleased due to the partnership that we've been working for many years from the Parlatinos and Crime Stoppers, which has now allowed, through the technical support that we've been able to receive, to be able to enrich the context of the legal framework that we have been working on together. So this is why I celebrate this cooperation, and I will work to continue to deepen our bonds. Today, we would like to present the very important and very relevant model law to be able to fight illegal trade and transnational organized crime. It has been promoted by Crime Stoppers starting in the year 2019, and after almost 2 years of very intense debate among PMs that are, or MPs that are part of the Security Commission here, it was supported at the end of last year in 2020. And finally, in February 2021, the Board of Directors was able to approve the final text, making it a model law, which is the law that we're presenting today. This process, since it was a process that was shared and was discussed, involved having many meetings of MPs and representatives of many important institutions who are very much linked to all of this as OECD, FATF, OAS, and WCO, whose vice president, Werner Ovalle, it's my honor to have him here in the panel with us. I would also like to highlight the participation of academics through the University of the Paz of the UN, which quite recently was able to start with studying or the bachelor for illegal trade. I am very happy that the academic sector it's part not only this topic but also the policy and that they provided their input to be able to generate public policy. The world needs for academia to have a leading role in this specific topic. So the institutional purpose to consolidate peace, security, and the international and regional legal order from Parlatino along with Crime Stoppers allowed us to consolidate a legal framework that even though it's not binding, it's fundamental to ensure that all the countries or all the member states are able to have a framework that's able to help all the MPs so that we're able to replicate this model law so that it could be linked to our national laws because this is a fight that needs to be addressed by all of us. We need to ensure that in the domestic law include legal frameworks such as this model law to be able to generate a legislative harmonization that allows us to address the problem of illegal trade as a regional problem because this cannot be done alone. But if we're able to address this issue together in the entire region, in all of the Americas, where we're able to move forward and where we can embrace the world in this parliamentary chamber, this scourge has evolved as fast as technology and as fast as globalization allowed it. The fast paced movement of technology, if we do not address it from a regional, diverse perspective, we will fail at this in eradicating illegal trade and transnational crime. We've always had people that carried out trafficking activities, but not like today. They're able to operate very fast at a global level where they're able to connect the most remote areas of the world in seconds and to the most cosmopolitan cities as fast as the internet, and they're able to move over 10% of world trade. This is a number that is quite astounding, specifically with the political power that these criminal organizations have been able to gather. Never before have criminals been so globalized, so wealthy, and with such political influence. Today, after every header that we see in the news in regards to crime and illegal trade and the impact of illegal trade in the global economy, it's huge. And the World Economic Forum estimates that $2.2 billion, which is 3% of the world GDP, were lost due to illegal trade in the year 2020. So, since these criminal practices proliferate, that means that we need to strengthen the capacity of the state to be able to prevent them, not to be able to remediate them because the damage has already been done when we establish institutional mechanisms where institutions are able to collaborate with the private sector so that we can identify the perpetrators and to be able to penalize them, and also to guarantee the rights of consumers which are victims of criminal organizations. This is why it's so relevant that today this model law, with the purpose of regulating mechanisms of prevention, investigation, prosecution, and the fight of illegal trade, contraband, and also the counterfeiting of products, should be sanctioned. So this is why this is a very complex law, because it's able to include all the different aspects, criminal and administrative characteristics, and it provides a legal framework to be able to promote the cooperation and multi-sectorial assistance among within governments and on an international level in the fight against illegal trade and organized transnational crime. So this is why it was shared with all the different actors. This law brings innovation because it indicates that it should consolidate several rules and solutions in regards to specific illegal behaviors in the same legal instrument. It also allows us to focus on a transnational level, ensuring that international cooperation is leveraged. And I go back to the main point, which is the interrelationship between parliaments and members of parliament, where every actor is able to address a specific topic. This law also brings clear definitions and fundamental principles in regards to e-trade, which it's something that's also new because this law wants to promote it but at the same time protect it. Why would it say this? Because it regulates it with the principles of good government, equity, and transparency. It also brings innovation in regards to the references it makes, specifically in regards to the collaboration needs of public, private, and multi-sectorial. And the law indicates that we need to create a council that is able to coordinate activities and discussions that can serve and provide technical assistance to be able to draft and give continuity to these specific policies. And finally, because it refers to education not only of users but also of consumers, it establishes that the application of the law and the execution of the law should include information and education to consumers and users in regards to the problems and the effects that we can have from illegal trade and transnational organized crime to society, and that how they're able to attack national security. Having said this, I call this partnership of Parlatino Crime Stoppers to ensure that this very important model law can now become international, to ensure that your governments and parliaments are able to receive this information and it can be further disseminated. This should be treated as a priority, and we should collaborate from the different spaces of leadership that we all have and that we're privileged to hold, and to be able to generate the best link between members of parliament and society to be able to prevent the scourge, as I mentioned, that is relentless in our region. So, with a heavy heart that I am unable to be here in person with you, this event that is of such importance, not only for the Parlatino, but for Crime Stoppers, and as Secretary of the Commissions, I would thank once again Mr. Pittinger, that you've trusted in the Parlatino and that you've decided to hold this event in our parliament. Know that this partnership after this forum will be even stronger and that everyone together will be able to further address the objectives that we seek. Thank you very much, and I embrace you from Argentina. Thank you very much, Madam Senator. You have here, we thank you very much. And there was a round of applause here in the chamber, Parlatino. And in its model law that we've been working on for just over 2 years and right through the COVID-19 pandemic. But we thought that many of these actions would be stopped completely, would be frozen until the pandemic was resolved. But actually, the Parlatino has continued to work in a virtual manner and advance with all of our projects. Thank you for your cooperation and collaboration in moving forward on this law. Madam Senator, you talked about cooperation and partnerships in the Caribbean. We thought it would be very appropriate to invite Mr. Sandy because the law talks about, you know, the Parlatino is made up by parliaments of the Caribbean. So we wanted to know what was happening in the Caribbean in regards to illegal trade and organized transnational crime. And the structure, just like Verno Valle is here in representation of the WCO. On the other hand, I have Mr. Sandy, which represents the Caribbean Custom and Law Enforcement Council for the Caribbean, and that dialogue between the Caribbean and Latin America, specifically into the Caribbean and Central America, needs to be strengthened. So this is why we thought it was very relevant to invite you today, Albert. I believe you have a presentation you will share, a PowerPoint?
In the meantime, I would like to say good afternoon to everybody. And I'd like to say to Alejo Campos and the Honorable Congressman Robert Pittinger, thank you so much for the invitation of the Caribbean Customs Law Enforcement Council to this tremendous forum. There's been a lot of learning for myself and I think for my organization. And we very much appreciate the partnership and the friendship that has been shown to the Caribbean Customs Law Enforcement Council. Nice to see you from the WCO. We're good partners. There is a presentation. Oh, possibly I can. I have it on a. I could take the one I have. There you go. I sent it.
Mientras resolvemos el tema de...
As we wait for the presentation, we would like to present General Buitrago from Colombia. I think that from your work at the Pole Fund, I would like to know what are the new mechanisms, methodologies, or routes that contraband or illegal trade in the region are now, how they're changing. There are several changes, but what are they? It would be very good to share that with the audience. Thank you so much, Alejo, for your invitation and a question. And I also thank the Board of Directors of the Parliament and our panel, colleagues, and honorable Congresswoman Silvia and Mr. Werner, we were able to see you recently in Guatemala. Alejo, I would like to celebrate here from Bogota the fact that the Parlatino has created such an important law as a reference for the standardization of the governments and parliaments in Latin America and the Caribbean to be able to strengthen the fight against illegal trade and transnational organized crime. This initiative, it's very important for those of us that have worked in the executive branch, those of us that have been able to work in the government and from law enforcement agencies in the fight against criminality, and specifically in the fight of contraband and counterfeiting goods and illegal trade in general. It is very important to know that as authorities, we have the support. And thanks to this model law, the Parlatino, certainly many other governments and parliaments of Latin America will be able to move forward in strengthening their domestic legislations, their instruments and legal mechanisms to be able to fight this crime that every day shows greater manifestations and connections specifically for transnational organized crime. Something very important, Alejo, that I'd like to highlight, it's the name of the law. The law was called Model Law to fight illegal trade and transnational crime. This is a perfect combination, and this is something that we request on behalf of the authorities to fight these specific crimes, just like it was mentioned by Senator Silvia. They have a global and regional complexity, and they're connected to other illegal behaviors, meaning that it's a crime that cannot be fought on by one domestic agency. We should work with other agencies that are able to fight drug trafficking, money laundering, drug trafficking, weapons trafficking, and terrorism. So this is why I think it's so important that we talked about the transnational organized crime plus the fight against illicit trade. And aside Aleco, the Parlatino has also approved other model laws which are fundamental and that are very much related in this fight against illicit trade, like the model law for asset forfeiture, the asset law for risk management, model law for human trafficking. So within the legal framework of the Parlatino, they created model laws that serve as a standard that can further be applied by the member states to be able to fight in a comprehensive manner against illicit trade, contraband. And I would also like to say, Alejo, that in the following aspects in our experience in Colombia and Latin America in the fight against contraband and counterfeiting goods, the very first thing I'd like to say about that, without a doubt, is Chapter 2 in regards to competent authorities, the experience that we've seen in countries in Latin America. It's where you have contraband, it's because you have corruption. And if you have corruption, well, you have contraband. Corruption has positioned itself as the most important fuel to the engine of contraband, and contraband has become the privileged modality not only for drug trafficking but for money laundering. So we have a monster with so many tentacles, and with corruption, drug trafficking, money laundering, currency trafficking, weapon trafficking, and terrorism are all involved in the same criminal economic system. This is why it's so important. This name that was given to the law in the purpose to moving forward in leaving behind the old vision that some part of the society has in regard to thinking of contraband as part of the culture of illegality and informality, specifically in the vulnerable areas or even at the borders. But rather, we should see that behind all of this, we have mafias and organized crime and societies and an entire criminal economic system that really feeds from the informality, from the illegality of that specific illicit trade.
This
The relevant authorities face a significant challenge as they seek to take on this model law, this standard. And for that reason, I would say there is really an inflection point here, which is institutional capacity, the institutional capacity of our authorities. That is where we have found precarious infrastructure. There are structures that are still new. They do not have sufficient budget. They do not have sufficient training to be able to face these mafias which seek to infiltrate and create corruption chains within the public institutions which are created to fight against illegal commerce. That's why it is so important as relevant authorities to define clearly roles. That definition requires institutionality to be mobilized, to mobilize all of its resources to fight against illicit commerce. We can't have these situations that we see in many of our countries where the tax authority and the customs authority are considered to be the primary authorities responsible for fighting against contraband. There are situations where sometimes there cannot be a cooperation or an integration, a proper integration of these authorities to fight against contraband. Here in Colombia, we have had that experience, and that is why, as the model law shows, we have sought to create this intersectorial group where we can all fight along the same work lines to defeat contraband. It is a key tool. It's also very important, as we're talking about the relevant authorities, to maintain control of our borders in order to fight contraband and to fight illicit commerce, whether it's e-commerce or physical commerce, which happens across our borders. This is an institutional weakness that we see at a general level in Latin American systems. That is why there is a need, as Parlatino has included in this law, the strengthening of borders. And that is a fundamental tool for effective cooperation. There are certain crossing points where customs may be enforced, but we have to ensure that that is where merchandise is coming across our borders. The third and fourth chapter of the law speak about sanctions and criminal sanctions. There's one fundamental aspect which has been key in fighting illicit commerce, which is intelligence, criminal investigations, investigating money laundering, and then using the tool that we have talked about previously of asset forfeiture in order to break down these criminal structures. This way we can prevent, research, investigate, sanction. If we don't have an appropriate judiciary investigation with the appropriate tools in the police forces and customs forces and other relevant authorities, We cannot affect the structural system, the criminal economy, in an effective way, and therefore end illicit commerce. There are many other issues that I would like to talk about, but these are the really important points, which are cooperation in fighting illicit commerce with international agencies. Colombia has participated with other countries in Latin America in global operations that happen simultaneously with Interpol, Europol, Ameripol, and other federal entities from other countries. These simultaneous operations happen at a global level, sometimes with up to 70 countries participating at a time, in specific sectors related to contraband, falsification of medications, electronic fraud, for example. In the Europol Bank, there has been some very interesting projects in arms trading, technology contraband, and others. These are very important projects that have been done in these multilateral projects with Interpol and others, working together with the police forces, customs forces, in order to attack these structures in a global way, as this is a crime that does not have borders. General, I'd like to take this opportunity, if you don't mind, to take a moment. I really liked what you said about the importance of multilateral communication. And so with that, I would like to offer the floor to Mr. Sandy so that he can, in fact, add to exactly what you're saying about what is happening in the CCLEC and what is happening in the Caribbean. Thank you so much, Alejo. That is perfect. Go right ahead.
Good afternoon again. We have a small presentation and model laws to combat illicit trade and transnational crime. A brief content, the challenge of illicit trade and transnational crime, the Caribbean context. I look briefly at the Parlatino model law approach, the Caribbean model law approach, cyclic strategy, the use of model laws agreements, the MOU, the Caribbean Customs Organization Treaty, integrated enforcement, development and use of ICT tools in connection with the fight against illicit trade and also transnational crime. The challenge of illicit trade and transnational crime in the Caribbean context. We know that we have Class A drugs originating in Central and South America in this region, passing through the Caribbean basin en route to the USA, Europe, transit in Africa also, and going as far as Oceania and other locations. Cannabis coming out of Central America, South America, the Caribbean, again transiting the region to the USA, to other Caribbean locations and further afield. And now we have the tremendous phenomenon of cannabis and designer drugs, even coming out of North America as a source country because of the if you want to call it, the legalization of medical cannabis and so on. A tremendous turn of the tables. Precursor chemicals out of China and India, arms and ammunition out of the USA. We're seeing quite a bit out of Venezuela these days in the Caribbean basin, exchanging even for food. We are also seeing a lot of illicit cigarettes coming out of China, India, and also some being produced right here in the Caribbean basin and traded especially between the islands, en route to parts of South America and so on. We see foreign currency. We also see a bit of trafficking in humans, and of course, trade-based money laundering, and a tremendous amount of commercial fraud in the region. Commercial fraud is a tremendous issue, tremendous problem. In some sectors, especially the clothing and textile sectors, goods coming out of many of the free zones, we see in the Caribbean basin as serious as 80% undervaluation of goods. This has been proven. We have prosecuted some. We have dealt with some administratively. And it is a serious, serious problem. And not only that, but based on the document that was done by CICLIC, which was taken up by the UK Border Force as they did a scoping study to these claims in the Caribbean basin, and they were able to confirm that this is indeed true. So these forms of illicit traffic and trade continue unabated in our region. And I would dare say that many of these enterprises have been for too long, too successful in their enterprises, and we have a responsibility to work together to deal with it. And this is why I am very pleased with the Parlatino model law approach. And I must say, it is to be ratified in Latin America and the Caribbean. It's after reading, realize it's a very well-defined, it well defines offenses and scopes. It establishes sanctions, administrative, both administrative and criminal. It is multi-jurisdictional as to its enforcement, intention of enforcement by customs, by police and others, FIA. It includes public-to-public sector cooperation, public and private sector cooperation. It covers e-commerce domain offenses. It's adaptable to various legal frameworks in the Caribbean and Latin America. It's quite commendable. It's aligned with UN sustainable goals, sustainable development goals. It strengthens economic, political, and social integration while combating illicit trade and transnational crime. We must say congratulations to Crime Stoppers and Parlatino for such vision and profound political will, and the governments. May the practice of this legislation eventually be as profound as the progress so far. I wish you that. There is model law, as you would know, within the Caribbean jurisdiction also, which has been adopted. For example, the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, which is also headquartered in St. Lucia. There is a Customs Control and Management Act, which was implemented within the entire OECS in the 1990s, which has served very well. There is also the CARICOM Harmonized Customs Bill and Regulations, which was finalized in the year 2016 and sent to customs administrations and governments for tweaking and ratification. That is still being awaited. I will just mention a few of them. These pieces of customs legislation or bills assure control of policies and procedures, customs policies and procedures. They are meant to facilitate legitimate trade and the movement of persons and conveyances as they secure the supply chains in line with international conventions, for example, the World Trade Organization Trade Facilitation Agreement. And the World Customs Organization revised Kyoto Convention, which could be generally applied or tailor-made to assist in the modernization as modernization packages for small island developing states as they seek to implement the trade facilitation agreement. It also enables the control movement of restricted and prohibited goods, which very often are the subject of illicit trade and other forms of transnational crime. You have the World Trade Organization General Agreement of Tariff and Trade, which has to do with the valuation, predominantly with the valuation of goods, and this is always contained in the Customs Act in some schedule. You have the WCO Harmonized Commodity Coding System, the HS Classification Code, which has been turned into model legislation as the CARICOM Common External Tariff, which has been espoused by the Caribbean countries. You know the others as the UN Convention on Trade, which has been adopted in some form as the Drug Control and Misuse Acts, which are implemented and passed within the Caribbean Basin and is being enforced as much as they can. And also the schedules of these drug control measures are also contained in customs prohibited import and export schedules. Also we have the Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty, which is also modular for assistance in criminal matters in the region. Now, one of the main initiatives of the Caribbean Customs Law Enforcement Council in respect of implementing laws or espousing laws which is meant to combat illicit trade and also transnational crime is the agreement establishing the Caribbean Customs Organization and the agreement on the mutual administrative assistance in customs matters. The Caribbean Customs Law Enforcement Council is transitioning from an MOU organization which was established in 1989. The organization has existed since the 1970s, but the MOU was signed in 1989. It is transitioning, hopefully this year, to a treaty organization. The inaugural signing was in May 2019 in Havana. The Caribbean Customs Law Enforcement Council, that treaty recognizes the importance of accurate assessment and collection of customs duties and taxes to national budgets. And if we are going to deal with commercial fraud in that form of delinquents, we must be able to do fair and accurate assessment and collection of customs duties. It is very important to governments in the region where 55% of the national budget comes from taxes, customs duties and taxes still. It ensures the proper enforcement of prohibitions and restrictions on goods. It recognizes the threats of transnational organized crime and terrorist groups with their substantial resources and the need to combat them effectively using existing and new multilateral frameworks for exchanging information and other forms of international mutual administrative assistance. It also encourages and supports the exchange of information among the members. The coordination of information gathering and intelligence sharing capabilities. Adequate intel flows within the Caribbean Basin is extremely important if we are going to fight illicit trade and to counter transnational crime. And for this, the World Customs Organization and the Caribbean Customs Law Enforcement Council, through an MOU, have established a joint intelligence office which is also the Regional Intelligence Liaison Office for the Caribbean Basin. It exists for the management of intel flows and the management of the Caribbean Customs Law Enforcement Council and the World Customs Organization Customs Enforcement Networks. We are under MOU obligations between ourselves, WCO and CICLEC. That office is also deeply involved in capacity building of the network, the officers who operate the network. It plans and conducts law enforcement operations, whether original or in collaboration with the WCO or other international multilateral organizations as Interpol and other organizations. I want to bring your attention to this very important aspect of the Caribbean Customs or the Caribbean Customs Organization. This organization has successfully, over the last few decades, developed some very seminal and important information technology tools which have been used as far back from 2000 up to the present time in the fight against illicit trade and transnational crime. Chapter 4 of the CCO Treaty states that there are general provisions for a central automated information system of the organization, where not only our routine information, but also the information, the trade, more so the seizures, and also other movement of vessels and persons throughout the Caribbean basin on using pleasure yachts and inter-island commercial vessels are registered by many of the different islands within the Caribbean basin which are members of CICLEC in these tools. And one of them is a sail clear and the regional clearance system. Quickly, it is responsible for many regional and international law enforcement successes. Between 2000 and now, we have realized more than 50 tons of narcotic seizures through the system. It is featured in Europe, it is featured throughout the whole Caribbean, and it is deployed as an administrative tool at the border of the Caribbean Customs administrations. It's a live online pre-arrival notification tool used by masters of pleasure vessels to send pre-arrival notification to destination customs, immigration, and port health authorities. It facilitates trades and is used by customs administrations as a risk management tool at the borders. It is freely offered to CICLEC members, of which some Parlatino members are members. It is useful for the management of COVID, and we were able to use this tool successfully in a number of the islands in the Caribbean to manage COVID in the maritime environment. The CARICOM Impacts, which is a sub-agency under the CARICOM Secretariat, is soon to receive a live feed of the data from SailClear and RCS for them to scrub, for them to do security scrubbing against their many watch lists and to issue alerts to the Caribbean Customs Administrations and other agencies. There is also a parallel system which we will, during this year, roll out called SkyCare and RADS. It is also premised on the same legislation. It's also a live online pre-arrival notification system for masters to make pre-arrival notification of their charter aircrafts, this one for aircrafts to destination customs, immigration, port health, and air control tower authorities in the region. It's identical, it has identical facilitation and enforcement functions as the RCS. We also have an incident registration database, which is for seizures, and we have a persons of interest database, which is being rolled out to all the members in the region, and it also has the capability of being networked if they so desire. And also, I would like to tell you that there is also what we refer to as a vessel targeting system. All these tools that I have previously mentioned are tied into a live AI-enabled system operating specific algorithms which will use all the data submitted in the above systems by regional members, including seizures and other targeted source data, to perform advanced risk assessment to counter risk at the regional borders. So these tools are very much used to fight illicit trade and also to deal with transnational crime. Also, we have a strong capacity building agenda, and we have online courses which we offer to our members in law enforcement and trade facilitation and so on. So, ladies and gentlemen, these are the modest efforts using model legislation that we are doing in the Caribbean along with other partners to deal with illicit trade and transnational crime. I thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. I think it's very good to understand what's happening in the Caribbean. Sometimes we don't have the best connection in regards to sharing information, and we know they're doing a good job, but we need more information. In that context, I take advantage of the fact that this forum should bring further cooperation from CICLEC and Parlatino, and CICLEC could further be strengthened with the WCO. And just in closing this panel, I would like to go back to you, Werner. And going back to the question that I asked General Buitrago in regards to the methodology that we're being able to see now in the world. Let's come back to our zone where we see more ports in the United States that are part of the routes of contraband. And it's more complicated because sometimes you think that the vessels that come from the United States, which could have, certain due diligence, which could improve, movement and screening of containers. We see new routes and methodologies. There's been a change. What can you tell us about that? In that sense, I think it's important to highlight the different work methodologies that we've been generating to be able to strengthen the information exchange mechanisms through implementing different task forces so that they can generate groups with different institutions together that are coordinated to have a greater impact in the strategies that we would like to apply with different experts. So we have been strengthening risk management, custom risk management, to be able to be a lot more assertive in the customs control from all the goods that come and leave the territory under the best international practices, in this case, under the different organizations, specifically WCO. It's important to highlight the interinstitutional work that has been done. For the case of Guatemala, we have an interinstitutional council in regards to illegal trade and custom enforcement, because we need to fight and ensure that all organizations, all agencies can work against illegal trade, and to ensure that we are able to follow up on all the strategies that are implemented. And as a public policy from the state of Guatemala, we have a national policy where we have short, middle, and long-term actions where we identify the actions that need to be taken by the state, but we also articulate what the private sector needs to do to ensure that we are able to fight this issue. It's very complex, and there's so many areas that we need to work on still. In that sense, I would also like to mention, with the support of the government of the United States of America, we have interinstitutional control post where we've been able to identify strategic routes with information from intelligence and from the national police with the information generated by our customs authority to be able to identify the routes are the ones that are used to be able to transport all the goods from illegal trade and to have permanent control posts that are able to do screening operations at any time. It's really helped to have a greater presence of the state in many areas that many times due to the lack of the presence in the state, they take advantage of that fact to be able to move their goods. And also it creates a work logic amongst different institutions in the state. If they're all together in the same area, this is something that really allows to generate trust and communication mechanisms amongst them to be able to really do the work that needs to be done. I think it's also important, and I take advantage of the fact that I do have the floor. The framework of the WCO really is betting on the fact of having HQs in different countries and different regions through the Intelligence Liaisons Offices, RELOs. And here, what we want is to have coordinated operations that are simultaneous at an international level, where not only customs authorities are able to participate, but rather we have the presence and the participation of police forces to be able to move forward from a security perspective in those specific vulnerable areas. We're also being able to articulate with other international organizations like the UN and UNODC and also the container control. They're working very much on identifying a lot of goods that are a product of illegal trade, and we've had really positive results due to that articulation. We do agree that the COICON has been working in Guatemala. I invite everyone to see it as an interinstitutional articulation that has been very effective and very practical for this country. Sometimes bureaucracies, when we talk about intelligence, sometimes we have to work fast, but bureaucracy slow down the flow of information. And by the time that we can finally do something, it seems that it's too late. And I see that you guys are work very fast on those points. I want to thank you so much for being part of our panel, for being able to share your information. I do not want to wrap up without first, quite briefly, we will sign a cooperation agreement between CICLAG and Crime Stoppers. We have been working on this for several months now. This agreement, I would like to invite you, sir, my dear colleague, Albert Sandy, if you could come up to the podium. This cooperation agreement, its objective, it's not only to share information with the customs authorities of the Caribbean, but also training component to be able to generate projects together and in a partnership with other Caribbean organizations. So without further ado, if everyone here could witness the signing of this agreement, Mr. Sandy.
Thank you, Alejo. This has been a while in coming, and thank you so much for your partnership and your patience and the vision that we share together and the strategy of trying to work together to share information and also to deal with illicit trade and transnational crime. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Albert. Este convenio.
Thank you very much, Mr. Albert. This agreement is signed by CICLAG and Crime Stoppers from the Regional Office, Caribbean, Bermuda, and Latin America. This agreement will be an agreement for regional cooperations for all the countries involved in the region in the Caribbean.
Okay, muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much for participating in this panel. Thank you, Werner Ovalle, which is the Vice President of WCO and Intendant of Customs in Guatemala. our dearest friend, Honorable Senator Silvia Giacoppo from Argentina. Thank you for being online. General Buitrago, it's been a pleasure to share some minutes of your time. And thank you, Mr. Albert Sandy. Thank you very much for your cooperation, sir. Thank you very much to everyone. And I would like to invite the next panel.